accurate in the face of the reality. And it makes me wonder if many of our crime stakeholders don't fully understand the depths of the problem our crime situation has reached. So Mr. Cudjoe basically said, right, or one of the things he said is he was calling for an iron fist approach. And he's quoted as saying, he's quoted as stating a phrase that he heard growing up: if you air freight to dead, we air freight to kill you. Right? And he said that is the price we must be willing to pay if we wish to regain our society. The problem with that, as I have pointed out repeatedly, is that criminals opt into a lifestyle where their life expectancy is, for all intents and purposes, well under the age of 30. They expect to die by violence, and they do it anyway. And they double down on being criminals and committing violent acts of their own anyway. So I don't know if the threat of legal use of force by the police is really going to be a detriment, because as it stands right now, the threat of a rival gang ambushing you and killing you is not enough to dissuade them. They're ready to fight a war. Gangs don't have to worry about due process and rules of engagement when they have a turf war. And that's not putting the fear of God into them. So why would police officers who supposedly have to follow a proper process actually do that? Now, if you want to say extrajudicial killings, I'm pretty sure that's a slippery slope that's going to lead to a lot of problems. I'll get into that later. Then Mr. Cudjoe said, and this is a worthy topic for debate, even though I'm going to say I disagree with it in principle. He said, what about holding parents responsible for the crimes of their children? And he pointed to a case in the United States where a mother was found guilty for involuntary murder for her son's gun rampage, right? The key point in this, though, 4 people were killed by the son who used a gun to commit a mass shooting, but the key point is the parents who gifted him the gun he used was found culpable. Here's the problem I have with Mr. Cudjoe's, and I don't know if he went into, he has more clarifying details that maybe he didn't state or was not reported, right? But at the end of the day, when you want to make something a crime, you have to put objective indicators, objective factors to say guilty or not guilty. And it can't be subjective. The problem is, I could very well see in a situation like that, parents, they might subjectively be responsible, but it's a judgment call. And you can't necessarily formalize a law based on judgment calls. You can, but it's a slippery slope, and the further you get down into removing individual rights, the less and less I believe you can do something like that, right? It can't be subjective. The law ultimately is best when it's objective. So if we make an objective law for parents to be responsible for the crimes of their children, we're going to get parents who did everything right get caught up in this law, get caught up with liability from this law. Because there are children who get caught up in the wrong crowd, get caught up in the wrong lifestyle, no matter what the parents try to do, and then you see the results. And I'm talking about parents who not only work hard, but also spend time with their kids and be parents and be there for their children. Some kids do slip through even the best of support systems. But then on top of that now, what about the parents who can't afford? They have to work 2 jobs. They have to work long hours, right? They are physically unable to be present for most of their children's life because they need to be able to put food on the plate of their children, clothes on their back, and a roof over their head. What about those parents? Because now we've reached the point where if we institute a penalized system like this, where parents are liable, and then you have, for example, single parents who have to work long hours, whose children are unfortunately neglected. And this is why single parenting is not something that you just do on a whim. It's a challenge that's hard. Those who do it successfully are applauded for it, but it's not something you just opt into because anybody could do it. But at the end of the day, parents now in that situation, their kids might go astray. not due to anything wrong of the parents, because they are trying to do the best they can with the deck of cards they've been dealt. And we're going to penalize them for it. Usually, after that point in time, somebody will come to do analysis in hindsight, and basically, because when you see the statistics, the demographics, I will bet you somebody will call it a racist measure. That's how it starts, because this measure will be targeting primarily the statistics will probably have a lot of single-parent homes, broken homes, low-income homes. And then they'll go to the demographics of what race, geographic location, etc., makes up those homes. And then there'll be some form of accusations of bigotry to a policy like this. Because at the end of the day, the crack cocaine penalties were called racist. But from what I understand, the reasons why they were so high was because inner city communities wanted strong action to prevent their children from going on crack cocaine. So they thought harsher penalties would work. And at the end of the day now, the subsequent generations are saying, oh my gosh, it's so racist. It's so bigoted. Because it's not going to be, we're not just going to be able to limit this for the few parents who deserve to be held liable. Because parenting is an art, not a science. So how are we going to have objective measures of their responsibility? Yes, in the case of, we've had 2 stabbings in schools, prominent schools, Signal Hill and CIC. If the knife was put into the hands of these children by the parents, by all means, because now we have an objective measure that makes sense. But if the kids got the knives on their own, if the parents had no idea that their children were capable of doing this, there's so many questions that could be asked that will turn this into a judgment call. Should they be held liable? You still have the opportunity to hold them liable in civil court, by the way. There's still always that. So it's not as though that the parents are scot-free when their child does anything wrong. But anyway, I will leave that there. I understand why Professor Cujo said it though. Because as Mr. Sanfanano points out, it's not as though we could treat this situation with kid gloves. I just think that this is the wrong track to try to find a solution. All right, let's move on. An old story, getting a slight update. Of course, those of you might remember the disappearing file that led to the $20 million judgment against the state on the 9 accused. Was it the Vincent Nelson? I can't remember which case it was at this point. The 9 accused, murder accused, that essentially got off, or got away with the default judgment, rather, because the state filed no defense. And now the state got the judge to, let me just make sure I don't get the terms mixed up, got the default judgment set aside late last year, and now they're appealing the case. The thing is, this just reads like a comedy of errors, where apparently the state is stating that the person that accepted the subpoena, the person who was served was technically not authorized to be served. The defense is saying, well, this is how we've always done it, and if you change, if you rule against the process now, because this is kind of the set precedent and how it's always been done for the last however many years, then you're going to bring into question a whole set of matters against the state up in the courts. So I'm looking at the judiciary, and I'm kind of not understanding how is it that this entire situation seems to be so messy. They're even saying, well, the judge didn't necessarily do the default judgment. It was the assistant registrar, right, who inserted a clause for an assessment of damages would be done by a master. So the lawyer for the state is basically saying, you know, he made an order against the state which he could not do. That must come from the judge and flow from her order. The order of assessment was ultra vires. What is it with seemingly as though the processes, the proper processes, apparently, this is based on both the lawyer for the 9 accused, who is, I believe it's Anand Ramlogan, who is contesting the appeal, and Rosta Nelson for the state, who is representing the state in the appeal. They basically say, look, this is all wrong because certain processes were not done properly. What is going on with the judiciary? And then let's not forget in this story that the AG, he came up and he said that the file disappeared. He got a whole investigation on the file. They found the file, and then we heard nothing else afterwards. It seems as though the police is not the only arm of the state where administration is not kind of falling apart. But I digress. I don't want to spend too much time on this story. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll finish up the daily review. There's a lot more things I want to get off my chest that came out in the news today. And hopefully, you will agree with me, because the implications are very much depressing. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back.
Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Before we even start this repatriation and reintegration process that we've already failed, or are we doomed to fail?
You've got to invest in the institutions that you've established to carry out those sorts of core functions.
We now get into the regional updates to give you an understanding of what's happening across our neighboring islands.
We have available a number of films that are worth showing.
So it was day one when the French Revolution started to develop the concept of universal human rights.
What happened this time is unprecedented. It's one of the largest terrorist attacks in history.
Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next in Seth. Hello, Carl.
Silky anteater or pygmy anteater, and we have 2 of the 3 species of anteaters right here.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And the case, it was the Vindra Naipal Kumar case. I can't believe I forgot the name of the case. I apologize for that. But yes, as I said, the $20 million judgment, that's on appeal, and it seems as though there are errors in process, multiple errors, and like I said, what's going on in the judiciary. But moving on now to the next story. Stop me if you heard something like this before. A businessman was killed because he refused to pay a tax to gangsters in the area. And that has led to opposition MP Dr. Rudal Monilal for calling on the establishment of an extortion unit within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Now, I understand the call. The only thing is, in order to make a unit, you actually have to have the capacity to do something, create something that doesn't already exist. To train a unit that doesn't already have certain capabilities, right? And this is where I have doubts, because the police have intelligence units and investigative units and so on and so on, and I would imagine they are trained to the best of their ability that the TTPS can train them. And if we want to just make a special unit for extortion, but he went on to say he wanted the laws to be changed, right, with regards to extortion by gang members, which should carry a penalty of significant jail time. Again, I understand the temptation of wanting to specifically target specific criminals. The problem is, I think for the most part, the crime of extortion should just be extortion. I don't know why on a principle level do we need extortion by gangs. Extortion should just be bad, and if we think the crime of extortion is getting out of control, regardless of the source, let's just up the stakes across the board. Why are we singling out anybody just because that's the flavor of the month? Again, this is where you get into allegations of a law being discriminatory because it's targeting a subsection unfairly. And like I said, I don't have confidence that the TTPS could institute better training to get a better unit to deal with the situation in a more targeted way. Maybe a special task force, right, where you take elements of anti-gang and intelligence, financial intelligence, etc., etc. I don't know. But I think to some extent the work can be done by units already on the ground. And if we really need more specialized help, that probably needs to come from abroad. But that's not something a lot of people like to hear, because sovereignty is important for a state whose crime situation is going out of control. I mean, Haiti's sovereignty is very strong. Anyway, I apologize for that dig against Haiti. Next story. I want to try and get through all of these things fast. The Ministry of Digital Transformation had a very interesting thing to say. They basically said, because cybersecurity is a big issue now, right? It's a big deal. And they've basically come out and said, well, it's difficult to get cybersecurity experts and retain them because essentially our remuneration levels are just not good enough. It's a hell of a thing. Our salaries are not high enough. People who are qualified for the jobs that we need people for, with the expertise and skills that we need in cybersecurity, will look at what we're offering and say, no mas, I'm sorry, not happening. And to be fair, I do think that our IT industry, among a long list of various professional service providers, etc., are probably underpaid. Yes, there will be some institutions who pay at competitive rates, at proper rates, at industry standard rates, closer to the global standard. But I think in too many cases, we underestimate as a society. We think of it as something cheap and unnecessary, and why should we spend a lot of money on that? Until all of a sudden, various state agencies start to get hacked, and now it's a big deal because the horse has already left the barn, and now we're going to try to close the door, right? But more importantly, the implication on this, and I think this is not the only place we will find this situation, is that we cannot afford what we're supposed to be able to afford. Now the question is it because, as the professor says, we don't do a good job of collecting our revenue? That could be part of it. Is it because natural gas price is not $5 per MMBTU, but 1 point something? Or however it is that the measurement. It's gone from $5 to $1. Or is it because we might have a bloated public service, and we might have way too much corruption and we can no longer afford. I leave that one up to you. Next story. Just days after the Vice President of Guyana basically denied any culpability by his state, his country, he has called for an investigation due to the fact that one Guyanese energy company, Guyana Power and Light Company, apparently they were the recipient, or supposed to have been the recipient, of the cargo of the barge, which subsequently capsized and caused an oil spill off the coast of Tobago. Now, technically speaking, he is not wrong still, because even though GPL was supposed to be the recipient of the cargo, to some extent liability should lie with the person delivering the cargo, depending on the terms and conditions. I mean, I guess in your contract you could have clauses that will, you know, give liability to different parties, but it seems as though, or I believe the assumption is that the transporter has liability right now until the goods are actually delivered to the Guyanese, well, destination. However, the VP has decided to look for a probe with regards to this whole situation. I think at the end of the day, this potentially does go back. Well, I don't think he necessarily said this here, right? But they want to establish the facts. To what extent can this be tied into black market fuel sales? That question is still up in the air, right? From what they have said, so far they have said to us that they have no agreement with any company that has been identified globally. These are the companies that own the tug and the names of the vessels, etc., etc. They have no commercial agreement with them. So there's a big black hole, because as one of our callers pointed out, we know the destination, so there has to be some sort of paper trail somewhere, but it seems as though the paper trail has a very abrupt dead end, which is a big red flag, right? And where that abrupt dead end comes now, there's a lot of questions. So kudos to the Guyanese VP for being proactive in this situation. At least I assume he's proactive in this situation. All right. Next story. And this is the big one that I wanted to get into. This one had me quite annoyed this morning, because Joint Select Committee on Cultural Diplomacy, chaired by the Minister of Trade and Industry, Paula Gopi-Schoon, they had an interesting proposal, and it seemingly started with opposition MP Rodney Charles, because there seems to be a lamentation in the failure of formalizing and streamlining culture as a business, right? Because look at our sister isles. Enough said. So Mr. Charles proposed a provincial solution to generate revenue through the taxation of chutney, soca, and calypso artists who perform across the region and the wider world. Then, I want to give you all the people who I think are involved in this. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is a lot of nonsense, and I'll tell you why I believe so. Then that was backed up by the Permanent Secretary, I believe, of Trade and Industry. No, sorry, the Permanent Secretary of Tourism, even better, and I'll tell you why. Mr. Videsh Maharaj, he said it was an option, right? In terms of the return, we don't have that figure. I don't think the CSO captures that data, but it's definitely something we could look at, and it's definitely something I think we would need. We would need. The question is why we would need it, and I'll get to why that question is explained later. Then, of course, the Minister of Trade herself, she went on to say, or she wanted she acknowledged that artists perform independently of the state, but the country may be able to benefit financially. So, sorry. The minister wanted to emphasize the point that the situation needed to be formalized. It really has, to my mind, to do with the formalization of these businesses, because in effect, it's a business that you're running if you are in fact earning revenue, whether it's locally or foreign, or so, and there is that problem in Trinidad and Tobago where many smaller micro businesses that are not formalized, it's difficult to track what they contribute and what contribution they should be making to the government, etc., etc. But herein starts the issue that I have, and that's from another permanent secretary. This time, she is the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Rita Toussaint. She said, the performers go abroad on their own steam. They do well, they showcase, they present, promote. But what we have to do between us, both ministries, Foreign Affairs, Arts and Culture and Tourism, is to find a way to be more strategic, find a way to package what we have in a way that brings discernible and precisely discernible revenue back to Trinidad and Tobago. And she is touching on, I think, where it turns into a Mickey Mouse show to an actual ethical, academic, economic debate. Because at the end of the day, the head of the Promoters Association basically said, well, what structures are in place? This is Jerome Priscilla. What structures are in place for the entertainment sector itself? Because we want to formalize it. But here comes my issue with this whole thing. They go abroad on their own steam. They are the cultural ambassadors for the country who do it on their own dime, who do it on their own energy, who do it on their own backs. And we're going to reward them for it by taxing them. Now, taxing them is not an issue if we're taxing them in order to supply government services to help this industry. That's generally the idea behind taxes. I don't pay taxes just because I'm a citizen of the country. I pay taxes because the government has to provide me with services. Therefore, it needs money to do so. Therefore, it collects taxes to pay for the services it provides me. Now, along comes an industry that, for the most part, had to struggle in the wilderness all on its own. Because we do, as far as I am concerned, zero international marketing of the island. And the hotel industry already has to pay a tax while benefiting practically nothing. One could say, oh, well, they're tourists coming through the airport. If you know the dwindling numbers of foreign tourists throughout the decades, you will realize that for all intents and purposes, we have lost ground to all of our neighboring Caribbean islands. And let's not forget, there's Southeast Asia, there's the Middle East like Dubai, there's the Mediterranean, etc., etc. We do not have a monopoly on tropical vacation destinations. Let's get that in our heads right now, right? You think tropics, you think Caribbean, but there's an entire globe in the equatorial tropical zone. So, what is the government doing for artists to say we need to tax you so that we can afford the infrastructure upon which you make money? Because right now, the infrastructure upon which they make money is either foreign infrastructure or infrastructure of their own making. We can't even get carnival rights. NCC apparently is in the red, according to the head of the NCC himself. So we're going to take now our ambassadors, one of the few things that we have to potentially market our country, and we're going to say we're going to tax you for it. I have no confidence that we're going to implement anything that will help support them. So it's just going to be a drain on the whole thing. It's going to de-incentivize our artists because, well, we're going to make less money. And let me give you an example, right? Because a lot of people don't understand. Marshall Montana at his height, if we use him as a focal point, as a spokesperson, we potentially could have marketed both the soca industry, carnival industry, but also the island of TNT successfully to the world. That's what Jamaica did with Bob Marley. And a lot of cynics will say, well, why should he benefit? Well, here's the example. The NBA had Michael Jordan. I am sure you know who Michael Jordan is. And he more or less took the NBA and elevated it. And he made a lot of money off of it. But you know who else made a lot of money off of it? The NBA and all the other players. Players like Magic Johnson, who was already a Hall of Famer before Michael joined the league, was more or less looks at him as someone that made all of them, all of the players rich. But we don't have soca artists and a soca industry that has that vision. We don't have a government that has that vision. Tiger Woods for golf, same thing. It elevated the entire sport. It elevated their ratings. And a lot of golf players will say, Tiger Woods made me rich because we got more, we had a bigger pie to get a cut from. But we're not thinking about that. What we're thinking is this small world mentality of, hey, they have a pie and we're entitled to a cut of it. Just because. Do we do anything to help promote that pie, grow that pie, support that pie? No. No, we do not. Arts and culture is left alone into the wilderness. We might like to think that the government is doing things, but I'm fairly certain, I'm fairly confident in saying, no. Just giving your party supporter, right, your favorites, giving them contracts and giving them sponsorship so that they can come on your platform at your political rallies to do a dog and pony show, to say, oh, look how great we are. That's not doing something for arts and culture. That's putting money in specific people's pockets. That's not helping the industry. Let's not get it twisted here, because the industry is not growing. And we're seeing nothing from either the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the Ministry of Arts and Culture, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're seeing nothing to promote the island, to grow the island culturally, as a tourism destination, as a cultural destination. We see nothing. Yet they want to tax. Because they need the money. And just wait, they're going to nickel and dime us more. Property tax, high electricity rates, now we're going to tax the artists who have to go and do it on their own steam. Their efforts. But we need our cut just because we don't know how to manage our own business properly. We're in the red, so we need you to subsidize us. We need the artists to subsidize our government expenditure. That's basically what it is, from my point of view. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me that later. But now we have to take a break. When we return, we'll have more topics with my guest. Stay tuned.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break a balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
let's go to the last part.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back. I'm joined by the PRO of the UNC, Dr. Kirk Mayhew. Dr. Mayhew, thank you for joining me. So I want to get straight into it. Of course, a lot of news is happening, particularly our energy sector. Methanex is going to trade its plants and essentially cut its production, as well as the fact that gas is trading under $2 per MMBTU US dollars. So these are bad signs. I already had Karen Teixeira on with me on Wednesday. She brought up this discussion. She was monitoring this closely. And of course, the opposition also is monitoring what's going on with our local petrochemical manufacturing sector.
Yeah, definitely. These are very bad signs for the economy. And the fact that we are losing more and more foreign direct investment, because foreign direct investment is a lifeblood of our economy. The oil and gas sector requires huge amounts of investment. And under the Keith Rowley regime, we now have negative foreign investment. So in other words, more money is going out and people are not coming in. That's a definitely worrying sign. And our economy is a gas-based economy. And the government is aware of this because on the order paper, as Dr. David Lee noted in our press conference last Sunday, Colm Imbert has a motion to increase our borrowing limit once again by $10 billion. And that's because they anticipate a drop in revenue. And so who's going to pay for that additional borrowing to pay public servants and just run the government? It's going to be taxpayers again. And so the P&M strategy is to tax and squeeze the people through property tax, through increased motor vehicle fines, all sorts of ways to squeeze the people, no wage hikes, all sorts of things, while destroying our productive base from Carney, back in the 2000s, to Petrotrin today, and to the entire gas-based industries through the debacle at NGC, where they intervened in the price mechanism and made it uneconomical for our world-class Point Lisas industrial estate to now rot and decay. It's a really terrible situation we find ourselves in, that when we return to government, we have to really concentrate our efforts on reviving the confidence and the investment in the sector.
Well, so that's an interesting conundrum, right, that you brought up there. If you all have a chance to right the ship as soon as possible, there's always the age-old discussion about when do we diversify, and in the short run, energy is more or less what's driving the economy. So to some extent, should we put effort into it in the immediate and short term? But then that always comes at the cost of deferring diversification along the line. Is it that right now we don't really have a choice as far as you and the UNC see it?
Well, as far as the UNC sees it, there's no trade-off at the moment, especially because most of our energy investment is foreign. So our local investment in the diversification of the economy would not necessarily be affected. And if our locals did invest in the energy sector, that is a form of diversification. Because there's two types of diversification, really. One is away from the oil and gas sector itself, right? So that we, but then we can also diversify within the oil and gas sector, go more upstream, do more things like services, and then Point Nesis itself was a diversification. We went from merely exporting crude and refined products to now, building iron, steel, fertilizers, methanol, etc. So that was a diversification within the sector. But then there's another type of diversification as well, which is diverting away from government-led projects, or government or foreign, so that the economy is more in the people's hands, in ordinary citizens' hands. Because too much of the time, what happens is that our economy is so concentrated in government because the foreign investors come in, or the government directly invests in industries, and then it has the tax, the tax revenues, and then it distributes it to the rest of the economy. And the economy and all businesses then become dependent on the state for foreign exchange, for investment, and other support, etc. So that so we need to also diversify in terms of the citizen-owned economy, the private sector. Right, so it's two types of diversification, and they're not mutually exclusive. We really do need to do both.
That's fair, but I am afraid that our private economy is basically limited to, not because of any significant barriers or significant enough barriers, in my opinion, but they've basically limited themselves to, well, we import things to resell.
That has always been the default situation, and we definitely, now there was a time in the 90s and 2000s when our manufacturing really expanded, right? And we essentially dominate let's say the snacks, food and beverages up and down the Caribbean, and we were able to even SM Jalila franchises Chubby in Canada. That's amazing. If you've ever been, when I visit Canada, I take a Chubby there, and it says, made by Cott Limited in Canada, under license from SM Jalil Otahiti, Trinidad. That is amazing. Usually see, made in Trinidad under license from Coca-Cola, Atlanta, yes. Georgia. So we do have these little things that we need to build up. On Angostura is another one. But yeah, I agree. We need to revitalize our manufacturing, and that goes to the foreign exchange crisis, because this government has been stifling our small businesses by rationing this foreign exchange, putting us in this foreign exchange crunch, because our manufacturers need foreign inputs to do their manufacturing as well, and to add value, and then to create here.
I'll just say,
and there's one other point, and I don't think people recognize it. In both UNC administrations, in 1999. 98, 99, or 97, 98, sorry, we had the Asian crisis, which really caused a depression throughout the world for those 2 years. And oil went down to $9 a barrel. But what happened in Trinidad is that we didn't feel it, because when the UNC government at that time invested in infrastructure for the very first time, invested in computers, made foreign used cars available, and all of a sudden we had this connectivity, and then low crime in the country. All of a sudden people started to do little services, gardening, have their own, bakery, catering services, and the economy, an onshore economy started to grow. And so we didn't feel it. Same thing in 2010 when Kamal Prasad Basesa came in. We did not feel what the rest of the world felt in the, what do they call it? The global recession, right? The Great Recession, sorry. It was called the Great Recession, the biggest one since the 1930s. And again, it's because the investment in the local infrastructure, in low taxes, in lower crime. So we have this social interaction where people feel freer to now invest in a little small business, to do things for themselves. That we enhanced the local economy, and we'll do that again.
It's interesting that this is maybe the first time I'm actually hearing about ideological differences in policy decisions in the economy. Big government regulation and taxes versus small government regulation and taxes. But I wanted to move on because there's so much to talk about. One of the things, of course, that is tied to the energy sector is the oil spill, in part because we have various aspects of petrochemicals running through pipes all over the country. Cleanup is now a concern because of what we've witnessed off the coast of Tobago. But I think that's part of it. If we have enough expertise and resources to deal with major emergencies like this, which we could potentially see again. The other part is also the fact that I think our borders essentially were breached for free by this unknown barge that, all of a sudden now we're trying to backtrack. Where did it come from? Who owns it? Who's going to pay for this thing? Because the THA is screaming bloody murder. We don't have money to deal with this. We already are behind with what we could get from the government. And the government is already behind on its own budget. Let's basically just say that right now. So this oil spill situation there, is it just the implications of it? Am I right to say that it has further reaching implications than just, oil spilled off the coast and it has to be cleaned up?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is an international issue because of two things of making it an international issue. Well, three things. The size of it, one. But also the fact that what is this thing about a ghost ship? I mean, so Stuart Young knows and has, these ideas of where it came from, where it's going, when it overturned, where it overturned, but has no idea about the ownership. So this whole thing about the ghost ship is one. And then also the lackluster response of the government. Keith Rowley is trying to say that he's responded quick. When, I believe it was 2013, there was a major oil spill under the PP government. Within 24 hours, Kevin Ramnarine, the minister, and that oil spill was nowhere near as large as it is today. Within 24 hours, Kevin Ramnarine raised it to a tier 3 level. And when you get to tier 3, that means you are asking for international assistance and help. And so it was contained very quickly. This is already an international incident. It is going in Venezuela's waters, if it's not there already now. It is in Grenada.
Yes. It is in Venezuela's waters, yeah.
Right, so it's in two other countries' waters now, and then there's a bit of a international blame shifting now because this government always likes to blame somebody, and then they were trying to put the blame on Guyana for it, so making an unnecessary diplomatic issue of this. What this is you see, when something breaks in the system, it has implications throughout. So this has to do with the breakdown of the 360 radar of our borders. We have these 12 Daman vessels that have not been maintained and are just sitting in Stobbles Bay doing nothing over and over again. We show videos, we raise it in Parliament, and the government does nothing. We talk about the 360 radar, and we raise it over and over again, and they're doing nothing. And these sorts of things will happen. And then the lackadaisical approach, Tobago, there's so much oil and gas in Tobago waters, right? And this is a lot of what the Tobago independence or autonomy discussions are about too, on how to deal with the maritime borders. So there's so much there, but there's not the resources to deal with these major international oil spills. So it is really the incompetence of this government coming to bite the whole country in our butts. Well, that's what it is.
That's a good segue point, I think. We're almost out of time, but I'll be remiss. Of course, the SRC gave some recommendations, and it's not just for high parliamentarian office holders, of course. It also includes people like the Commissioner of Police, etc., etc. There's one, I believe industrial court judges are facing a decrease, which is curious as to how that came about. But at a time when the public service is saying take 4%, I basically want to ask, and a couple of people have said it, some of my callers, and also Mr. Anisette, shouldn't Parliament and government and public officials also just, you know, if they need a raise, take 4%?
I think that's only fair. That's only fair. The leader of opposition has made it very clear that you know, she would not go down that route of the SRC at all, and that she said no raise for the top, for her, for the Prime Minister, etc. However, she did say, you know, at the local government level, councillors are making like $3,500, and some of their assistants are making less than minimum wage, less than $3,000, and that has not been rectified as yet. You know, the people at the lower end, yeah, we definitely think that they need a pay increase, but the parliamentarians and the people at the top and president, etc. No, freeze that. That is what the opposition leader said at the Monday night crime forum when Selwyn Cudjoe brought up the issue. So that's our position on it. It's grossly unfair.
Dare I ask, and I'll put you on the spot here to close, should these salaries be frozen until our economy is objectively at a much better point where we don't have to tell the public service we don't have enough money to give you more than 4%?
I believe so. I believe fair is fair, and it should be equitable, and those at the top should be facing the same economic hardships as the rest of the country is expected to face. That is absolutely clear.
Well, Dr. Mayhew, thank you for coming on. Short notice, but always appreciate your willingness to come on and have the conversations, and hope to have more in the future.
Thanks a lot. And there's a press conference today at 11 a.m. So it'll be on our social media channels, and of course media is invited to come in and ask questions for that. So that will be Wade Mark and Barry Paderat for that, 11 a.m.
Thank you, Dr. Mayhew. Folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, we open the phone lines. We want to hear from you. You could tell me where I was wrong this whole morning with all my rants, or where you disagree with what I or my guests have said. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Scarborough Secondary School and Lambo Anglican Primary School reopened following oil spill closure. TNT Miss World contestant debuts stunning national costume in India. Shooting incident leaves one dead in central Trinidad. And internationally, American Airlines raised baggage fees. Now for the details. Scarborough Secondary School and Lambo Anglican Primary School resumed classes today after being shuttered since Ash Wednesday. The Division of Education Research and Technology made the call to close the schools on February 14th, citing air quality concerns in the aftermath of the recent oil spill. During the closure, students transitioned to online learning, but they are now cleared to return to campus. Despite welcoming the reopening, Tobago's tutor representatives Braden Roberts expressed hope that the decision was made with careful consideration and that safety remains paramount. Trinidad and Tobago's Asha Abrahams unveiled her national costume during the Miss World opening ceremony in India on Tuesday. Proudly representing her country, Abrahams highlighted Trinidad and Tobago's renowned cultural elements such as sailpan, soca music, and carnival festivities. The intricately designed costume, crafted by Solange Govia of Lost Tribe, showcased the fancy sailor motif, revoking the golden era of sailor mask portrayals. According to Govia, the costume aimed to honor the sophistication, vibrancy, and strength embodied by the masquerade character. Tuesday night, a shooting in central Trinidad resulted in the death of one man and left a woman injured. Shillan Williams, 25, of Church Street, Chickland, Freeport, was accompanied by a female companion on Mirage Lane, Cunupia, when the sound of multiple gunshot wounds rang out. Upon investigation by residents, Williams was found lying in a pool of blood, suffering from gunshot wounds, while his female companion was also wounded. Despite immediate medical attention, Williams succumbed to his injuries at the scene while the woman was rushed to hospital for treatment. Investigations are ongoing. In international news, airlines are implementing changes aimed at incentivizing customers to purchase tickets directly from them in order to earn frequent flyer points, including raising the cost of checking bags. As of Tuesday, the fee for checking a bag on domestic flight with the airline will increase from $30 to $35 when purchased online, and to $40 if purchased at the airport. Similarly, the fee for a second checked bag will rise from $40 to $45, regardless of whether it is purchased online or at the airport. This adjustment marks the first increase in bag fees by the airline since 2018. American Airlines, headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas, initially introduced bag fees in 2008, starting at $15, as a response to the escalating cost of jet fuel. Well, that's it. News on the hour on WESN. I am Sira Ali. Thank you for watching.
Welcome back, folks. This is Talking Money on WSN, your content capital show. Michael Small here once again. We open up the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Of course, you could talk about whatever I have spoken about or my guests have spoken about. You may agree, disagree, have different insight to give, or you could bring up a topic that no one has spoken about for the morning here on the show. That's fine as well. It's always good to highlight things that perhaps we ourselves have not highlighted. And of course, our first caller is from Petty Valley. Good morning, caller. You're on there.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Sean, this word diversification starting to get me sick. People beat it up like a Good Friday bubbly. I will tell you why. You guess what you just had there, Mr. Dr. Nehu. He said again, diversification, diversification, diversification. Politicians only use it when they are not in power. People's memory is very short here in Trinidad and Tobago. I remember Mr. Patrick Manning wanted to have a smelter plan. You remember the smelter plan? The same UNC beat that smelter plan and march up and down and protest it and shut it down. That smelter plan was the diversification today. So I doesn't want to hear them when they come crying politicians about diversification. They only say it when they're not in power. Have a nice day, sir.
Thank you, caller. Now, to be fair, I brought it up. I say it a lot. And technically, I too am not in power, nor do I have plans anytime soon to try to get into power. Let's make that clear. To his credit, Dr. Mehu, right, and I'll separate him here from other politicians, he was not giving us the usual rhetoric of, well, we need to move on from oil and gas and diversification. No, he was saying, well, we should try and do both, you know, and he sees a way that to some extent it can be done, which is not the usual rhetoric, to be fair to him. But I understand your point, caller. I do understand your point, because it's true. Now, I don't know to what extent you'll agree with me, but I think to some extent all politicians done it, as you pointed out, which includes the current administration, unfortunately. But I'll say this, though. You've brought up an interesting question, Because I actually don't necessarily like when people talk about the PNM and they talk about all the things they disagree that Eric Williams did. To be fair, the PNM will bring up all the good things Eric Williams did when they want to say how great is the PNM. But to some extent, he was then, they, the ones that are there currently are now, and what Eric Williams did, whether good or bad, only has so much influence on what the PNM does now. To some extent, we should judge them on their own merits. And I think it's similar to the UNC. Now, there will be some members of the UNC who were there then, and we could judge them for their flip-flopping of stance potentially, right? Was Dr. Mayhew in the UNC then? I'm not entirely sure. I don't think so. I definitely don't think he was the PRO of the party. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. A significant chunk of the executive leadership would have been different, right? So there are members of the UNC who weren't there then, and I think it's fair for them to have, okay, this is their opinion now, they're stating it now. I don't like it being tied to the opinion of the party back then, because I also don't like it when people want to tie the current crop of PNM to the opinion of the PNM way back when, right? Let's judge the politicians to some extent on what it is they do now. Yes, we still have to factor in historical influences. We have another caller on the air. Good morning, caller. Caller, hello?
Hello? Hello,
morning, morning.
Yes, sir. I hope I'm not. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Go ahead.
Yeah. I hope I'm not talking. Well, I'm certainly talking out of the topic. But I called to say, why is it there's such great silence by the government of Trinidad and Tobago about the situation in Palestine? Now, we heard Guyana yesterday, I think it was, making a strong statement saying that what is happening there is annexation of land, not mere occupation as America is trying to justify, but is an annexation of the land. And you know, if you go back in time enough, when Dr. Eric Williams had warned us about Venezuela and their consideration to look at Trinidad and Tobago as part of their territory, and one of the 5 islands was particularly of concern at that time. And Dr. Eric Williams always preached that we should look at Venezuela very carefully in that regard. But anyway, it's today's world, and I'm saying I find we are so very, very silent from the government and CARICOM. So, you know, we always say that sometimes we follow what CARICOM has to say on the matter. But CARICOM is saying absolutely nothing. The government of Trinidad is nothing. The only people that spoke up was Guyana, and of course, you know, they have their thing with Venezuela, so they might say, well, they had a reason to speak.
Yes.
But their statement was so strong. They say it's not mere occupation, you know. What Israel has done there is annexation. They are taking the land. So I'd like to hear your comment on what you think is happening here with Trinidad. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. That's an interesting question, and there's multiple levels to this. So first of all, I think part of it is to do with the fact that every nation, country, politician, political group only has so much political capital to spend, and you could earn more by becoming popular, by doing good things that are seen as effective or popular, etc., right? Mia Mottley has way more political capital to spend due to the goodwill that she has internationally than, say, Barbados would naturally generate on its own, right? America, to some extent, has more political capital than we can see because they don't just dictate things to the rest of the world, but they also spend a lot of money in foreign aid. Let's be real now. And they also guarantee the security of certain nations around the world. So they have, including Europe, right, which was one of the issues with NATO and the spending. So that's one of the reasons why they have so much political capital to then spend around the world. We don't have enough political capital to potentially go against the United States position with regards to Israel-Palestine. That's just, I think, the bottom line. That's point number one. We are already trying to convince the United States, help us out with this Venezuela sanction thing so that we could still get gas from Venezuela. So the last thing we on a level want to do is to anger United States foreign policy and then have our situation, our deals with Venezuela sunk because, you know, we're not seeing eye to eye on enough things internationally. So part of it is unfortunately self-interest in that respect, because there's another respect I'll get to later. And it goes back to what I said. I don't think we have leaders with grand ambitions for the country. We have leaders who are ordinary people with grand ambitions for themselves, right? Because to some extent what I just said is potentially unethical. One could say it is unethical. Of course, the flip side is a nation's government does need to put the needs of its own people before the needs of other people. That's just reality across the board. That's how it's done, right? And it's not as though we could afford to give up more. We already our backs are already against the wall, so how much could we afford to sacrifice more for other people? I know that sounds harsh, but that's the unfortunate truth. Because it's not as though we have 90% of the population marching in the Red House over this issue. That's just the reality. I don't think the democracy of Trinidad and Tobago is going to want to die on this hill. The other aspect of it is the fact that, yes, there's a reason why Guyana is involved, because they're looking at their executive situation with Venezuela. And they don't want an international precedent to be set that an act like this could happen and the global community is not going to do anything about it. And then when it happens to Guyana, how could they be confident that the global community will help them? Now, CARICOM has, and one could say this might be slightly convenient / hypocritical. We've come out to support Guyana. We're not necessarily supporting Palestine. I'll get more specifically on my opinions on Palestine a little later. In TNT, we do have to consider our stance and the message it sends with regards to those situations like that, which will then translate to the situation between Venezuela and Essequibo. We don't want to unnecessarily inflame the situation because, again, we're trying to do business for better ways with Venezuela, right? Again, countries don't have friends, they just have interests. There are very few alliances which are ironclad. At one point, the UK and the US were something of an ironclad alliance, which is ironic because the US fought a war to gain independence from the UK, but that's besides the point. We also have to note that not only do we have to worry about our international relations with the United States and what our stance could then communicate to the US if we have disagreements, but also this goes into the situation between Taiwan and China. And one of the other big players in Trinidad and Tobago is China. And we tend to do a good job of going down the middle and still having, to some extent, both nations court us, both nations trying to do things for us, not pushing either nation away. And again, do we want to now potentially take a stance that is going to anger China? Because to some extent, if and when, although I don't think militarily it's feasible for China, just based on some of the controversies happening with its rocket soldiers, corruption found with regards to material being misused, etc., money being, absconded with, that should have gone to the military force, and it has caused the military effectiveness potentially to tank some of the principal units that would be involved in an invasion of Taiwan. So I don't think it's practical, but hey, I didn't think Russia's invasion of Ukraine was practical, and Russia did it anyway. So it might still happen. China, politically, is to some extent going to want to agree with Israel with regards to their right to enforce their sovereignty on another group who supposedly the rest of the world sees as a sovereign state, but they don't. So we have all of these sorts of diplomatic considerations in the mix. I don't know to what extent the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is actually taking all of these considerations. Given their track record, this is one of the few areas of government I will give the benefit of the doubt and say they know what they're doing, or at least so far they seem to know what they're doing. So I would assume that they know what they're doing given the results, and they're taking all of these complexities into account and are doing the best that they can. What does that mean for Palestine? Nothing good. Because I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't understand what Israel is doing. It makes no sense. There's no real military objective there, right? Except one that will technically be, at this point, I guess you could say, potentially a war crime. Because to what extent does Israel have a right to the territory of Gaza? So the United States is saying occupation, but I think part of the reason why they're trying to say that is not just to hoodwink people, but it's also to set a precedent that might force Israel to accept a more acceptable legal precedent and status, which would, in theory, be temporary and could leave room to rectify the situation in the long run. In the long run. But in the short run, it is what it is. And personally, I knew that the situation, they're attacking with such violence in the face of Hamas holding hostages. I just felt that Israel jumped the shark at that point in time. And ironically, this is the price of peace. The price of peace, because my opinion is, and I believe this is true with regards to European generals, American generals, Israeli generals, Russian generals, Chinese generals. A lot of these guys now don't have a lot of experience in bitter war. In 91, the US generals had experience in Vietnam. They knew what was what. That's why that invasion of Iraq was executed so well. And then as time went on, it seems as though the expertise of leadership being forged in such, a Darwinian environment, that more or less, those leaders were gone. And what we have now is essentially guys who learned in sand table exercises and in practice, and not actual practical reality. And there's a difference in quality. And I think it's the same thing for Israel. They had their glory in a bygone era when they were fighting wars of defense against all their neighbors. Cool. That was then. This is now. At the end of the day, Hamas has inflicted violence upon them. I get that. They have a right to respond. I get that too. But the response is, to me, very pointless. What could we do about it in Trinidad and Tobago? I don't know. I did note that, yes, there was a protest in support of Palestine and protest in support of Israel, I believe last week, or within the last 2 weeks. I found it interesting, but that, to me, is a bit of a problem because we don't protest enough for our very immediate needs. And we can't afford our own excess. I don't know if we could afford now to take a stand on someone else's situation. Unfortunately, right? This is the thing. We're a global village, but we're not. But we're not. There are other people who could advocate for Israel, and I think to some extent the government might be partially right in thinking other people, sorry, not Israel, for Palestine, other people are advocating for Palestine. Not a lot of people are advocating for us. We need to advocate for ourselves first. That's just the unfortunate, bitter reality of any nation. All nations put their own citizens first. And to some extent, their politicians were elected to do that before. Now, it might be unpopular, it might be harsh, and yes, it might even be unethical. But we have Sanfan on the line. Good morning, caller.
Hi, Sean. Morning.
Morning, morning.
I listened to you, you and Dr. Mayhew. And the question we have to ask ourselves, Sean, is the diversification that we all talking about and should be taking place at a faster pace. And ask ourselves, where did we get this wrong? Because since Dr. Eric Williams as a Prime Minister, we have been trying to diversify this economy. And we started with increasing the secondary school population because we didn't have enough places. And if you look at, they have been trying to diversify the economy on a technical basis. So some things along the lines of Germany, where they have more, where we put out more technically astute students that can then go into industry and build industries. And we have not been able to do this. We had San Fernando Technical, we had 2 technical colleges in this country, and John Donaldson Technical Institute. And they did a good job. And since that, we have tried various institutions, bringing secondary schools with all type of technical education. We've gone to UTT. We've had youth camps which we have played the fool, close them down, open them back, closing them down. And we have to ask, what is the problem? What is the problem that the state can't get it right? And let me say this, one of the main issues is the culture, that the business culture that has developed alongside our oil wells, our energy wells. And that is that culture of buying and selling, which has produced what is a very small number of extremely rich people in this country.
Yeah.
Extremely rich people. And those people have, all they have done is open more buying and selling, more malls, and those people have not taken their funds and decided that, hey, rather than do this, let's do something else. Let's do something that we can earn more revenue. We can export. We can start to make something. And that is the conundrum where the state, those people have gotten so powerful now that the state can't influence them. And they are the ones in control of the economy. It is so sad. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. Literally when you started, and you started the question, where do we go astray? That is exactly what I thought. I basically phrased it as foreign exchange need of the private sector. That's basically what I thought. The fact that the private sector is run on foreign exchange defeats the purpose, because we'll never be diversified because the foreign exchange is earned by the oil and gas sector, right? And exactly what you said there. And I would go a sense further in saying that for all of the business schools that we have, and business degrees that we have, and management training that we have, and supposedly entrepreneurial training that we have, GATE did not work. Let's just make that clear. I've said this before, I'll say this again. GATE did not work because too many people took advantage of the system, overbuilding the system, and more importantly, we didn't really have a plan after educating the people. We just kind of assumed if, we educate them and then things will happen. That's not how it works, right? You have to think about it holistically. That's what we say about crime. Think about it holistically, not just try to deal with one aspect. Okay, so they're educated, but if they don't have jobs for that education, what's the point? By the way, it may have contributed to the diminishing number of tradesmen in the country, right? Because the trade schools apparently are still there, but I don't know. I have not seen. I have heard of young woodworkers, but not necessarily too many. Full-out carpenters, build a house, build a roof, do kitchen cupboards, etc., etc., etc. So we have limited business acumen because the business model, this is what a lot of businessmen of a certain generation, they do. They find something that works and they keep repeating it. And if it doesn't work, they don't understand that they need to figure out differences. They just try to repeat the model until it works. So we get a foreign franchise, we bring it in, we make money. We import stuff to sell from the foreign franchise, we make money, right? Even when foreign exchange got difficult, we saw an expansion or an increase in foreign franchises. One of the things I didn't say earlier when I disagreed vehemently with the idea of just taxing artists performing abroad when we offer them no support as a nation, right? When they are one of the few things that actually promote the country and the culture, but we're going to tax them for the job they're doing that the government is not doing, that is market our country. And we have so much to offer and people don't know it, including our own citizens. But one of the things that I think about is they should, if we're so desperate for revenue, why don't we tax new businesses that are based on imports? I'm not saying we ought to tax all the old ones, but maybe we should. Maybe we should. But there are some legacy businesses who will get caught in the wash, right, of wanting to tax the McDonald's, Prestige Holdings and all of their foreign franchises and the McDonald's franchise holder and Starbucks, well, maybe not Rituals, right? But Rituals still imports. Let's not get it twisted. Even though it's locally made, local owned. But we don't need another foreign clothing brand store to sell us high-priced clothing in a mall that's going to even further increase the markup because costs are high. We don't. And to some extent, the consumers are pushing back against some of that because we could just order it online, but then they want to tax that, right? They want to tax that. Why don't we tax? Because it's cheaper, I think, to buy retail, maybe I'm wrong, than to have these retailers bring in goods and services. Maybe it's wholesale prices, but it's foreign exchange going out in bulk to prop up a business that really and truly offers no innovation in the industry or entrepreneurial, benefits. It's just another retail something that is reliant on foreign exchange. So you want to bring a new one, you want to bring a new foreign brand shoe company, or you want to bring a new foreign brand fast food restaurant, let's get some initial taxes onto that. And if your fast food restaurant has to bring in foreign food, maybe we should tax that. Of course, it comes to the ethical issues of, do we want these businesses to go bust? Because depending, they may or may not, although I'm not too sure. I think Prestige Holdings is making a profit. It's not like it's being run like our carnival, folks. It's not like the NCC. So there are a lot of hard questions there, but I think it all comes back down to, we did not really grow the economy to actually allow for innovation and proper entrepreneurship. Because if it's just, we bring a foreign franchise and we import everything to sell, that has negative issues on the economy, but the politicians don't care about that until it matters. And then what do? They tax everybody else because they don't actually have the strength of character to deal with long-term issues that are causing long-term problems. Because it's too hard to go against people who are potentially their financiers. Don't mind the fact that the actions of allowing these things to happen potentially is causing our economy to slowly but surely sink into the quicksand. But hey, some of them are retiring within the next couple of years, so it's not their problem. Phone number should be up on your screen. You could call it and have, oh no, sorry. We are way over time. I so lost track of time, folks. I want to thank all of our callers. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Mayhew. That was some interesting insights from all of our callers. And that's just the state of where we reach. I know it sounds very pessimistic, but at the end of the day, we have serious problems. We need serious solutions. We don't necessarily need harsh solutions. We need smart solutions. And I think therein ties in one of the reasons why we don't have innovation in the country in our private sector is because innovation across the board generally is not rewarded. Meritocracy is not rewarded. Original thinking is not rewarded. Our education system is basically set up to breed a whole set of people who only know how to say yes sir, no sir. We train them for management and strategy and expertise, and then they get into the job, and then the entry-level jobs basically beat any sort of independent thought out of them. And even then, it's only a fraction of the educated who have the capacity for independent thought. That's why so many students are the ones that others don't want in the group, because they don't actually contribute to anything. But folks, despite all the pessimism, things can turn around. Make today a good day, as my co-host always says, because we still believe in TNT. But we have to be an engine for change. We can't wait for someone else to do it for us. Until we do, we'll be where we are at. This is the status quo. We have to want to change it. If we believe we can do so, I'm sure Michael Small, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN. FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzonett.com, for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website, fanzonett.com, to make your purchase today.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful. The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break a balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
In the studio, now you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim, right, or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website, fanzonett.com, to make your purchase today. The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former Mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's. WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
And lost. And as pro-lifers, we believe that that's an unethical treatment of human life. And so hopefully through this decision, people can begin to examine that and to make changes in the industry.
Reproductive rights are sure to be a major issue in this year's presidential election, as the Biden administration has sought to restore abortion protections. Republican candidates Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, however, have voiced support for increased abortion restrictions.
Now to India, where farmers are staging a large protest this week demanding higher prices for their produce. As tensions rose yesterday, police fired tear gas, scattering thousands of people who were trying to reach the capital, New Delhi. During those clashes, one person died, but today protest leaders say they're undeterred and their movement will continue. Reporting now from New Delhi, here's Pavni Mittal.
At this point, it doesn't seem like the standoff between the government and farmers is going to be resolved anytime soon. Now, the farmers, in honor of the protester who died on Wednesday, said they will suspend the march to New Delhi, but the protest continues in the form of a sit-in. They also blame authorities and the police crackdown for injuries of about 100 farmers, they've said. Now, the government and farmers' unions have held about 4 rounds of talks over the last few weeks, but they have broken down. Farmers have a long list of demands, the most important of which is they want the government to pass a law guaranteeing them a minimum price at which government agencies buys their crops, and they have about 24 crops on that list. Now, the government came back with an offer for about 5 crops, and the farmers have rejected this and say they will continue their march. The government is wary of the farmers and wants to do whatever it can to stem this issue. And part of this has to do with what happened all the way back in 2020. The government passed 3 agriculture reform laws. Farmers protested for more than a year. There was a sit-in at 3 sites on the outskirts of New Delhi, forcing the government to eventually repeal these laws. And you know, India is gearing up for general elections in a couple of months, and farmers are an important voting bloc. So, you know, they're doing whatever they can. On one hand, there is that police crackdown, barbed wires, barricades along the routes on the borders of New Delhi. Internet has been suspended in some districts. Large gatherings have been banned. And of course, like you said, tear gas has also been fired. On the other hand, the government is saying, well, you know, let's get back to the table, let's have a conversation, let's resolve this. But at this point, you know, speaking to farmers' unions, engaging the sentiment there, this is going to be an uphill task for the government because there is complete breakdown of trust between the two.
And that's a wrap for this news update. Thanks for watching.
in the countryside, a new revolution is underway. A big change that's coming from the cities and gradually invading the fields. And this revolution is digital. This young farmer isn't playing on his smartphone. He's fine-tuning the feeding process for his cattle.
In the kitchen, there's alfalfa and straw. This is corn silage and grass silage. The robot knows where each animal is, so it will give the correct ration to a dairy cow and a different ration to a heifer.
24/7, 365 days a year, robots serve Antoine Maurice's cows.
Here, my cows are free to eat when they want, and when they need milking, they go to the automatic robot by themselves. That gives the animals a really high level of well-being.
It was being able to turn the family farm into a dairy business version 2.0 that convinced Antoine to take over the reins.
I couldn't see myself at 50 years old, like my parents, uncles and aunts, not being able to milk anymore because the work was too hard. These days, quality of life is crucial for a farmer.
But having all the mod cons comes at a cost. The Maurice family spent 100,000 euros on the milking robot alone. The cost of change and fear of the unknown. That's what's still holding up the introduction of new technologies into farming. To the north of Chartres, Luc Laurent seems like any other traditional farmer. He grows 320 hectares of grain, but most of his work is now done on a computer. He gathers huge amounts of data, which has a direct impact on his crops.
I have a passion for my job, a passion for mathematics, a passion for agronomy and the physiology of plants. I was born with a pair of boots and a computer, and my aim now is to predict.
Considered an oddball in France, Luc had to export his ideas elsewhere.
I wasn't able to do this in France. I tried to do it for 20 years and wasn't able to, and after 3 years in Romania, it was job done. These satellite images help farmers a lot with their decision-making. In Romania, we're involved with 7 or 8 farms of between 2,000 and 15,000 hectares.
Not everyone is forced to go to the other side of Europe. They have customers at the end of the path.
Hi, Florian. I brought you the camera. We'll set it up here because it's dry.
Himself a farmer, Xavier Chaban has invented a connected camera to monitor watering systems.
Okay, it's online and running. Check it out. Perfect. Go on, try to move it.
A godsend for his young customer who no longer needs to drive around everywhere to make sure everything's working.
It stops me going backwards and forwards. I have 2 sites, including one where I need to be present to wind and unwind the hoses. So this gives me a lot of autonomy. Digital tools make things a lot easier. These days, a single farmer has to manage a much greater surface with a lot more to do. I'm not sure if it's easier, but digital does help to reduce the workload.
Farming is changing, and so too is the market. And some see this as an opportunity.
They've grown a lot.
They have indeed.
Alban and Arthur are visiting one of their customers, a watermelon grower.
They're superb. They're flowering and everything. But these have a few aphids on them.
4 years ago, these 2 start-uppers, both farmers' sons, created a 100% digital organic fruit and vegetable market that unites small-scale growers and distributors.
A farmer is first and foremost a craftsman. Today, we're using digital to bring new solutions and new ways of working. And the aim, of course, is to make sure we all make a living out of it.
They developed their idea here in Châteaudun, in the startup incubator dedicated to the farming of tomorrow.
TT, some good news for you. I have your cucumbers. Your cucumbers, 4 by 5, reserved until August.
The aim of their online platform is to facilitate organic produce transactions at fair prices.
The idea is to have in real time all the information about a given product, the amount of available stock and the starting price, because we work with starting price plus transport cost to have more transparency on the true cost of the product and how much it costs for us to deliver it directly to the customer the following day.
Digital tools that save time and gain productivity, while making everyday work a little easier. That's the promise these farmers, version 2.0, have bought into. They want to believe in a future where happiness is still found in the fields.
What were your first impressions when you got to Paris?
It was really impressive. The setting, the atmosphere, the smells, even the light were different. It was really just so wonderful. I got a great welcome. I had a great stay and I really don't regret going. I absolutely loved my time in Paris. Je kiffe mon séjour. Ouais.
Togolese model Alex Seff is walking in Paris on the occasion of the first ever foreign edition of FIMO, that is Togo's International Fashion Festival, which celebrated its 10th birthday in Lomé in the spring.
Bon, Jacques, where did you get the idea to relocate FIMO to Paris?
We thought after 10 years of FIMO that it was time to send Togolese fashion, African fashion, out into all the capital cities of the world, starting with Paris.
You're also a designer. What are the biggest challenges that African designers face?
I'd like to launch an appeal to everyone who loves fashion living in Africa to start by wearing clothes made in Africa. I'm not telling them not to wear luxury brands, but at the same time, they also need to encourage African designers. We're trying to change African fashion, especially in Francophone Africa. Mentalities need to evolve. People need to start by wearing clothes designed and made on the continent, so that designers are able to make a decent living from their work.
And Made in Africa is a concept that comprises clothes made not only on African soil, but also in the African diaspora.
Where did this passion for Madras begin?
I realized that Madras was hardly known, despite being a wonderful representation of Caribbean culture. But it's also not just Caribbean culture. It's got a wonderfully rich history that's been nourished by travels, by colonization. Madras is a part of India, and Indian migrants to the Caribbean brought that culture with them, where it was reinterpreted, and now it really does travel all over the place. This is a Madras patchwork, which is pretty important to me because it's comprised of all these different pieces with this beautiful cotton and all of these combined threads, which is very characteristic. And for me, they also represent cultural threads. This collection is about the links between the Caribbean, India, and Paris.
Le wax. So wax fabrics aren't on the way out?
No, absolutely not. I can safely say that we're still wearing wax prints in Ivory Coast. But today, we've decided to promote woven African pani, or wrappers, namely Ivorian pani. And the work that these fabric producers come up with is really remarkable. So it was important for me to reference these artisans from Western Ivory Coast to promote woven Ivorian pani.
What are you presenting today?
The collection is called What Color Are Your Cats at Night? So it's a collection based on different shades of gray. There you go.
Because at night all cats look gray.
That's what you might think, but not always. In any case, there will be a lot of gray cats, but there will also be a fair few cats of some other colors, although not loads.
A collection on the theme of masculinity and femininity?
Yes, masculinity, femininity, but also freedom. The freedom simply to be, and the freedom to be able to say what we want through the clothes we wear. The freedom to walk with your head held high, to accept yourself, and maybe even the freedom to have a message, or to make people accept you, or at least start to accept you.
What does fashion mean for you?
For me, Fashion is a means of expression. I don't know if you can see, but I have albinism. It's not always been easy for me here because I'm African, but I've got white skin. So for years, I really struggled to be myself, with how to identify. And fashion helped me to accept myself. Fashion can help us feel worthy. I've worked for different designers. Having that access to fashion, that really built up my confidence. They accepted me as I am. Often when I was doing ad campaigns or photo shoots where I was having my makeup and hair done, well, sometimes when I saw what they'd done to me, I didn't even recognize myself. And it's then that I started to accept myself, to actually find myself beautiful. That really helped me. And that's why I say that we, along with designers and stylists, really have a very important message to share. Young people are really my priority, really empowering them. It's about expressing ourselves, whether the message be one of happiness or sadness, because that's what my clothes express. And you know, most of my designs I came up with when I was unhappy. And it's true that instead of seeking remedy in drugs or cigarettes, things like that, well, I prefer to create. That's it. I create.
A recent UNESCO report says that Africa is on course to be the world's next major fashion hub on the condition that the industry receives sufficient state support, a condition that's by no means guaranteed.
Follow our international journalists on France 24. Douglas Herbert, Angela Diffley, Robert Parsons, Philip Turle, and Armand Georgian. From the newsroom to the studio or live on air, they are on standby 24/7 to analyze world events. Whether tackling historic, geopolitical, economic, or environmental issues, our experts get to the heart of the biggest international news stories. They contribute to our special reports and scour the headlines for information. Follow it live. Follow the news. Follow France 24.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Best of culture every day on France 24. With exclusive interviews with the most talked about people in entertainment, Arts 24's Eve Jackson and Olivia Salazar-Winspear bring you the latest from the world of art and entertainment. Our critics Marjorie Hash and Florence Villeminot speak to the biggest names in music, and Lisa Nesselson and Deeptika Laurent share the newest must-see films and TV series.
Join us every day for the latest news from the world of culture on Arts 24.
WESN.
This is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Sean Michael Small. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Guyana's Power and Light Incorporated denies link to sunken barge in Tobago. Proposal made to tax artists who perform internationally. Middle-aged couple robbed in Claxton Bay. Now for the details. Last night, Guyana Power and Light Incorporated, GPL, firmly refuted any association with the sunken barge discovered in Tobago's waters. This response followed Guyana's Vice President Bharat Jagdeo's urging for a comprehensive investigation prompted by a report from Guyana media outlet News Source, suggesting potential ties between GPL and a fuel shipment deal. In an official statement, GPL acknowledged awareness of the recent oil spill off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago, expressing solidarity with the nation and concern over the environmental consequences for its citizens. The topic of taxing local artists who perform internationally was raised during a joint select committee on cultural diplomacy session held yesterday. Naparima MP Rodney Charles proposed the idea as a potential revenue-generating measure by imposing taxes on chutney, soca, and calypso artists who tour globally. Additionally, suggestions were made to levy taxes on imported materials used for carnival designs in Trinidad and Tobago. Chaired by Minister of Trade and Industry Paula Gopiskun, the JSC aimed to assess the effectiveness of TNT's cultural diplomacy and explore avenues for enhancing its cultural and tourism offerings.
I was fortunate to be a part of a conference in 2012, and the mayor of New Orleans was saying, right up, they knew exactly how many persons were there in the hotel business, how many cooks were there, what is the average salary. They could have said, this is government's investment, but they also said, we are guaranteed this much in taxes at the end of it. And this is why I feel Trinidad and Tobago needs to go. While we are on that path, PS has raised the artist registry. That's one of the first steps that we had in terms of actually formalizing this thing. So in a way of moving away from government support and having private sector more involved, the tax allowance was born.
A middle-aged couple in Claxton Bay were tied up, assaulted, and robbed by armed home intruders early on Wednesday morning. Police said the couple secured their Cedar Hill Road home around 8 p.m. on Tuesday and went to bed when they were awakened around 3:30 a.m. by three masked men with guns standing in their bedroom. One of the assailants bound the couple's hands and feet and announced a robbery, while another suspect kicked the male homeowner several times. The suspect relieved the couple of $12,000 in cash, a 55-inch television, 4 20-pound gas tank cylinders, power and hand tools, a half bottle of puncheon, a bottle of wine, a hairdryer, perfume set, a bank card, an identification card, a driver's permit, a cell phone, and a BMW X5. Well, that's news on the hour on WESN. I'm Sean Michael Small. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Donowa, attorney at law. Once again, I'm happy to bring the law and you. Of course, you can stream us on WESN CC as well as our traditional media and our podcast, Strictly Legal with Rondell Donowa. Of course, we're excited again. I have a guest in studio today and we are going to speak about the safe community and residential safety tips and how the law applies to what is reasonable for us and in terms of how you protect your community and your home. Of course, you know, there has been a lot of recent aspects of criminal activities in this country where it results in home invasion with respect to the criminal element. And we have seen that as a result of this type of criminal activity in our homes, it has affected us economically, personally, and of course mentally.